January 6, 2026, Paris. The Canadian Embassy. A newly elected prime minister stands next to the leader of Denmark and says something that should be impossible in modern geopolitics. The future of Greenland will be decided solely by the people of Denmark and Greenland, not by threats, not by military force, not by anyone who thinks territorial sovereignty is negotiable. Mark Carney just told the President of the United States to back off, in public, on camera, with Denmark's Prime Minister smiling next to him. And here's what makes this absolutely wild. This isn't a story about Greenland. This is a story about how the United States just lost control of the Arctic, not through war, not through diplomacy, but because its closest ally looked at American threats and said, "We're done following you." Tonight, we're showing you how Trump's attempt to annex Greenland became the single biggest strategic backfire in modern NATO history, how Canada just chose Denmark over the United States, and how 7 of America's closest allies coordinated, in secret, to shut Washington out of the region it assumed it would always dominate. Because what you're watching isn't just Arctic politics, it's the moment America's allies stopped trusting America. Let's back up. What the hell is Greenland, and why does anyone care? Greenland is massive, 2 million square kilometers, 80% ice, home to 56,000 people, most of them Inuit. It's been Danish territory for centuries, though Denmark has gradually given Greenland more autonomy. Strategically, Greenland is a gold mine. It sits directly between North America and Europe. It controls access to Arctic shipping routes. The U.S. already has Patuxent Space Base there, formerly Thule Air Base, with radar systems critical for tracking Russian missiles. If you want to monitor what Russia and China are doing in the Arctic, you need Greenland. Economically, even better. Greenland holds rare earth minerals worth hundreds of billions, stuff you need for batteries, electronics, defense systems. As Arctic ice melts, offshore oil and gas become accessible. Whoever controls Greenland controls resources the entire world needs. Trump floated buying Greenland during his first term. Denmark politely said no. He dropped it. But this time, different story. During his second term, Trump revived the idea, except now he didn't ask, he demanded. And when Denmark refused again, the White House made something very clear. Military force is always an option. Not a joke, not hyperbole. The administration explicitly said that annexing Greenland, a NATO ally's territory, by force was on the table. Denmark heard that and realized something terrifying. If America will threaten us, no NATO ally is safe.
Most Canadian prime ministers would have hedged, expressed concern, call for dialogue, try to stay friendly with both sides. Carney did the exact opposite. Hours after Trump renewed his annexation threats, Carney stood in Paris and publicly sided with Denmark against the United States. Not diplomatic language, direct repudiation. He used the phrase "solely by the people of Denmark and Greenland," language specifically designed to reject any American claim. He announced Canada is opening a consulate in Nuuk, Greenland's capital, and then he dropped the real bomb. He's sending Canada's Governor-General to Greenland in February to personally open that consulate. Now, here's why that matters and why this is brilliant. Canada's Governor-General is Mary Simon. She's Inuk, Indigenous. She previously served as Canada's ambassador for circumpolar affairs and ambassador to Denmark. She knows the Arctic, she knows Greenland, and she knows exactly what her presence means. Sending her wasn't symbolic. It was a calculated message to 3 different audiences. To Greenlanders, Canada recognizes your Indigenous right to self-determination. To Denmark, Canada stands with you, even if it means defying the United States. To Trump, you're not just threatening Danish sovereignty, you're threatening Indigenous peoples, and Canada will support them against you. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen understood immediately. She thanked Carney for being very clear in your statement when it comes to respect for national sovereignty. Then she said something crucial. Together with all our NATO allies, we can secure the Arctic region. Notice the phrasing. All our NATO allies, not led by the United States, not coordinated with Washington, together as equals. Translation, we're building Arctic security without American leadership. And Carney wasn't alone. While this was happening publicly in Paris, something else was happening behind the scenes, something that should make Washington very, very nervous. France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and the United Kingdom coordinated with Denmark and Canada to issue a joint letter defending Greenland. 7 NATO allies, one message. Greenland belongs to its people. It is for Denmark and Greenland, and them only, to decide on matters concerning Denmark and Greenland. Read that again. 7 of America's closest military allies just publicly rejected American territorial claims. No diplomatic hedging, no middle ground, flat rejection. This is extraordinary. NATO allies don't coordinate against the United States. That's not how the alliance works, or at least that's not how it worked. But here's what Trump didn't understand. Threats break trust, and once trust breaks, allies stop following. Frederickson took it further. She warned explicitly that American annexation of Greenland would spell the end of NATO. European leaders took that warning seriously because they realized what Frederickson realized. If America will threaten Denmark over territory, no one is safe. Trump assumed European allies would quietly object and then defer to American power. Instead, they coordinated a unified response that diplomatically isolated the United States. And Canada? Canada was at the center of that coordination. Carney met privately with Frederickson in Paris before the Ukraine Security Summit. They used that meeting to coordinate Arctic security approaches that explicitly exclude American territorial ambitions. Let that sink in. Canada and Denmark, 2 of America's closest NATO allies, are now building Arctic security cooperation that works around American demands instead of with American leadership. But the real shift? It's bigger than just Canada and Denmark. Here's what's actually happening in the Arctic right now and why the U.S. just lost its dominance without firing a single shot. For decades, Arctic security meant American leadership. The U.S. had the largest military presence, the most bases, the dominant strategic position. NATO Arctic policy was effectively American Arctic policy. That model just collapsed. Canada is deepening ties with Nordic countries. Finland and Sweden recently joined NATO. Both have serious Arctic capabilities. Norway has decades of Arctic experience. Iceland provides strategic positioning. Combined with Denmark and Greenland, you now have an emerging Nordic-Canadian Arctic bloc that's coordinating independently of the United States. And this bloc controls critical geography. Greenland commands the North Atlantic approaches. Iceland sits astride key shipping lanes. Norway monitors the Barents Sea. Canada owns the Northwest Passage, and Finland and Sweden cover the Baltic and northern Scandinavia. If these countries coordinate Arctic security without American leadership, the United States loses its dominant position, not through military defeat, but because allies simply chose to work around American aggression. Carney and Frederickson keep emphasizing working together as NATO allies to secure the Arctic. But notice what they don't mention: American leadership, coordination with Washington. The subtext is deafening. We'll secure the Arctic ourselves. You're not invited. So what does this actually mean? What are the consequences when America's closest ally publicly chooses Denmark over the United States? Let's start with the immediate strategic loss. First, military coordination. Canada, Denmark, Norway, Finland, and Sweden are already planning joint Arctic exercises, Arctic patrol programs, intelligence sharing networks, and none of them assume American participation. Second, economic infrastructure, Churchill port development, European partnerships, Arctic shipping route management, Canada and Nordic countries, critical mineral supply chains structured around Canada-Europe cooperation without American intermediaries. If Canada coordinates Arctic resource development with Europe instead of the United States, American companies lose access. Rare earth minerals from Greenland, critical minerals from Canadian Arctic, shipping through the Northwest Passage, all potentially structured through partnerships that bypass American involvement entirely. Third, and this is the big one, the precedent. Other allies are watching. They're watching Trump threaten a NATO member over territory, and they're learning a very simple lesson. American security guarantees are unreliable. If the United States will threaten Denmark, a founding NATO member, a close ally for over 75 years, then what value is the alliance? What value is American protection? Countries start building alternative security arrangements, arrangements that don't depend on American commitment. Because if America threatens you today, who's to say they won't abandon you tomorrow?
And here's the part that should terrify strategic planners in Washington. The damage is irreversible. Frederickson, Carney, and European leaders now know the United States under Trump will threaten Allied territory. That changes everything. The trust that NATO allies would respect each other's sovereignty, broken. And once broken, it doesn't heal just because the threat temporarily recedes. Canada has to consider, if America threatens Denmark over Greenland today, will they threaten Canadian Arctic sovereignty tomorrow? European countries have to plan for American unreliability on fundamental issues like territorial integrity. The alliance isn't broken yet, but the assumption of American leadership just died. Trump wanted Greenland. He wanted to demonstrate American power. He wanted to show that when the United States demands something, allies comply. Instead, he got this: a unified European rejection of American territorial demands, 7 NATO allies publicly opposing the United States, Denmark threatening that annexation would end NATO, Canada opening diplomatic facilities in Greenland specifically to support Danish sovereignty, a Nordic-Canadian bloc coordinating Arctic security without American leadership, Indigenous Arctic networks that transcend borders and reject American claims, and most importantly, he lost trust. Greenland isn't becoming American territory, but the Arctic just became a place where American leadership is optional rather than automatic. That shift from American dominance to multilateral coordination without American control is the real strategic loss Trump created. Canada chose Denmark, Europe backed that choice, and the Arctic just became a place where the United States no longer assumes allies will follow its demands. Trump wanted power. He demonstrated unreliability, and Mark Carney made absolutely sure the world saw the difference.